The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again now. CDMOs are typically not in the 10 ring or the sweet spot of guest selection for the Business of Biotech podcast. We like to focus on new and emerging biotech execs with their own therapeutic pipelines, or in other words, the sponsor companies that CDMOs work with. However, when a CDMO exec can bring along a sponsor exec for a transparent look behind the scenes of what can at times be a complicated relationship, I'm all in. You might recall that we did this a few weeks ago when Ray Therapeutics' Jenny Holt and Forge Biologics' John Maslowski gave us some up-close and personal perspectives on the contracting and execution of the sponsor plus CDMO relationship. That was a well-received episode, so today we're going to do it again. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and here with me today are Fina Biosolutions Scientific Director and Owner, Dr. Andrew Lees, and Scorpius BioManufacturing VP of Business Development and Client Partnerships, Steve Lavezoli. Steve and Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you guys on the show. I appreciate it. I'm Lavezoli. Am I pronouncing that close enough to correctly?
No, you got it. That's perfect.
Steve, I got to tell you, I don't. It's not a bone that I have to pick with you. But I do want to just point out and put you on blast here publicly for stealing one of my favorite people in the world, sniping her away from our company, Abby Sorensen, who, by the way, and to her credit, helped me arrange this interview and get you guys both on the horn at the same time. Thank you to her. But boy, she's one of my favorite people of all time, and you got a good one there, buddy.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you. And actually, I think Andy will probably agree with you as well as it relates to Abby's involvement with Fina and, just her ability to bring Scorpius to a CDMO that's known around the world that, a year ago, nobody knew who Scorpius was. Now we're kind of recognized when I say the name Scorpius. People know who it is. And a lot of it is that.
Actually, that is exactly why we're here together, is probably because of Abby. There was a period of time when I was getting essentially, it felt like daily or multi times per day emails from Scorpius. And I would just keep deleting. And then, I saw they were, a CDMO. We were, looking around. I thought, well, let me just see what they are. And I looked at it. I thought they kind of had a weird logo. I do a little origami, and I thought, and then I, passed on. But then, we were looking more and more seriously at a new CDMO, and they had also penetrated our commercial officers' radar, and the CMC group that we work with. And so they came to our attention, and we met with Steve and Abby. I think it was at BPI, and met there, had dinner, talked, and that chemistry was really what, from that meeting was really what started us down the path of considering them. So that was, that once in a while a cold call and a random email does work and penetrate. It's getting there at the right timing.
Yeah, Andy, you said that. Did I catch that right before we get to you, Steve? Did I catch that right that you had been working with a different CDMO previous to this relationship, or had you not been working with?
We had been working with another CDMO, and I can give you a little bit of background about Fina Bio because you need to understand a little bit of this. I started Fina Bio in 2006. based on my expertise in the area of protein polysaccharide conjugate vaccines, specifically the chemistry. And early in my career, I developed chemistry that is now widely used, particularly for new manufacturers. It was licensed originally to Glaxo, but because there were no patents in China or India, I began working, when I started Fina Bio, I began working with the Serum Institute of India. And the idea would be that although I can't affect prices, I could affect competition. And so by helping to teach the chemistry to new manufacturers, I could bring in some competition in the developing world to help reduce the price of these conjugate vaccines. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we've succeeded. The Serum Institute's pneumo and meningococcal vaccines are the lowest priced vaccines in these classes. So part of the model, which I call my not for much profit model, is I don't have any investors. So what that means is I can make licensing arrangements and do deals without having to make money for investors. So in terms of the royalty rate, I looked at what did I used to get when I got royalties from India after it trickled through everybody else. And I said, if I was happy with that percentage, then I'll take that percentage from the Serum. And it was low enough that I essentially turned what was a service contract into a royalty stream. And that is now helping to fund the current work. The next phase, we were invited we were asked to see if we could develop the protein component of these protein polysaccharide conjugate vaccines, which had been one of the most expensive components. And remarkably, a scientist who had been laid off from Glaxo came on starting as a volunteer. And then when we got a small contract from the nonprofit PATH, that set us on the path to develop this protein. And as part of that, the scientists developed a E. coli strain that can make soluble disulfide bond proteins in the cytoplasm without needing to refold, and which grows remarkably well. And so that set us off to be able to produce the lowest cost version of this protein. And I deliberately set the price as low as I could rather than as high as I could. This was not from any particular business smarts, but it had to do with I didn't have to make money for other people. And I was frustrated as a scientist that I could not afford to buy this protein previously. So as part of because we had no money to do a GMP project, what we did was execute a license, essentially a license exchange with the company InventPrize out in Seattle, which was founded by the former director from the Serum Institute of India. It's funded largely by the Gates Foundation, again, to develop low-cost conjugate vaccines. So they needed our CRM197, the carrier protein. We gave them the license to use it for their vaccines in exchange for their doing GMP manufacturing. And so that created the first batches and got our GMP product established. But they need to now focus on their own vaccines, and we need to establish our Fina Bio as having, being a reliable supplier of the protein. So if your clinical program depends on our protein, you want to make sure we're going to be around. And that's why we decided we needed to move to a larger manufacturer that could support the phase 3 and licensure.
Yeah. What kind of capacity are we talking about, Andrew? Like, you said a larger manufacturer,
right?
Just give us a sense for what kind of capacity you need, what you're putting out.
But this is still small scale. Mm-hmm. by others. So because we have such a highly productive strain, we are making from the E. coli about 3 grams per liter of purified protein. So even a relatively small fermenter, I think Scorpius is going to be going up to 300 liters. So that's going to be making almost 1 kilo of product. So a few runs would likely, supply for the next for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. And it would be very easy to scale up beyond that. Yeah. It's just because it's E. coli, it's very simple to grow. And we have a relatively simple purification process.
Steve, I'll let you jump in here. What, when you first met Fina, and that's a great story. I love it. Andrew's giving you some pretty candid feedback about your origami logo and and the way that he put off the cold calls for a long time. It's an important element of relationship building, though.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yep. So one, I want to get your perspective on that. What from your perspective made Fina a good fit for Scorpius, but also sort of your take on how Fina fits into the broader landscape of Scorpius clientele. Like, it seems maybe a little bit atypical, but I'm curious about how they kind of line up in terms of.
Jump in. It's very atypical. Yeah. And that is really their willingness to adapt to this atypical is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Atypical is kind of the key word, right? I mean, I think, I came from large CDMO world. And, in the large CDMO world, someone like Andy and his program, it would have never gotten any kind of attention from, a big CDMO. It's just, and that's not a shot at Andy or a shot at Fina. It's just the really where the focus is of that scale of a CDMO. So when we think about Scorpius, we're focused on both microbial and mammalian programs. We're also focused on a certain clientele, right? We want to be partnered with these smaller to mid-sized biotechs. And essentially they can't get the type of attention, certain expectations from a CDMO as far as willingness to work with them. And I think that, Fina fits right into that. Andy fits into that. His personality, his willingness to kind of do things like this podcast and also do joint publications. Those are all important to us. It's important to Fina so that they can grow their business. And it's important to us from a new CDMO in the space. And it really made sense, after we met with Andy, and I think he mentioned, Abby was with us, and Abby does join a lot of those, initial meetings. I don't think that's even something that's characteristic of most, CDMO partnerships. You normally don't bring your marketing manager along with you to a dinner. And it's really so that Abby can understand, or the marketing team can understand, what are the pains of Andy? How can we help him support his business, grow his business, promote his business, and do things that other CDMOs just aren't doing, right? And hopefully Andy sees the value in that. And, we'll continue to do those kind of things because it's important for him. It's important for us. And we're not only that, we're extremely dedicated to getting his program through, GMP manufacturing and making sure that he can bring, really, really cool technology to the industry that maybe he wasn't able to do if he didn't have a partnership like Scorpius. So, so that's the great thing about, this relationship with Andy and Fina in my eyes.
Yeah. So you mentioned an important thing. Because we're providing an ingredient essentially in other people's other people's vaccines, it's going to take us a long time before we really scale up and start selling a lot of product and becoming, highly profitable from it. So it's really, but without having an established manufacturer and demonstrating that, we're going to be around for the future. It's kind of this chicken and egg thing where we got to get established. And Steve and Scorpius were willing to recognize that and accommodate, that kind of scheduling. And it's from that sense, it's been a really good partnership. And it's really the people. I mean, after this, the business meeting, we began meeting with the technical people. And there was no question when we met with them, from the questions that they asked, we felt very comfortable, working with them. This close communication, Steve is on my joke of the day list that I send out. And, we talk almost every day about various issues. And if I have, there is a concern, it's just as easy to talk to him first. And it's that part has been very successful.
Yeah.
The whole contracting process was extremely straightforward, and working with Steve has really been a major part of why we're able to work together. His approach and willingness to see both sides of the issue, of the problems that we have, both Scorpius and ours, because they need to move forward as a CDMO and you can't survive if you don't make some money.
Right. Yeah, and it's a good segue. I wanted to go there next and talk a little bit about contracting and MSAs. I've learned through doing interviews with CDMO plus sponsor execs that even in, the more straightforward, like, Steve, maybe, you sign a contract with someone who's manufacturing an antibody, seems pretty cut and dried, but it's not always cookie cutter. It's not always, there are always nuances. In this situation, I mean, Andrew just said it was a pretty straightforward contracting experience, which surprises me a little bit, I guess, given that it's sort of an atypical.
It's not quite true, actually. It was straightforward. I mean, we got through it. But yeah, and I had a lot of. I mean, I don't know how to do this kind of stuff. I'm not used to seeing what's normal, what's abnormal. Mm-hmm. I had, the outside consultants who were 100% guiding me on the process, and they were experienced.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I mean, I know that one of the challenges in doing a sort of a series of episodes, including a sponsor plus a CDMO, is that you can only go so deep before the sponsor or the CDMO want to say, there are details to this relationship that we're not willing to make public. And I totally get that. I totally understand. It's been a challenge, right? It's been a challenge to even get credit to you, Andy, for agreeing to come on. It's been a challenge to even get sponsors to come on and talk about the work they're doing with their CDMOs. But to the extent that you can you just kind of walk us through what that contracting experience looks like in such a way that might offer some advice for, we cater to new and emerging biotech leaders. So in such a way that might offer some advice to those who maybe haven't contracted with the CDMO before, but are entering that phase of their growth.
Sure. So the first thing is our CMC consultant, Brevis Refero up in Canada, they have a contracting platform. It's called RFP Navigator. So I think it was 2 years ago, we began on that, and we actually had selected another CDMO to go forward with. And what happened was the royalties that I had been receiving had started to be, were going up steeply, and then they took a sharp drop. And so I no longer had the money to go forward. Mm-hmm. So a year later at Bio, a year ago, June, or this last June, I guess, we put out another RFP and invited Scorpius to participate because now we knew about them. They didn't exist for the previous one. Mm-hmm. And looking at the entire package, we selected them out of that. But it was all the getting to know the CDMO ahead of time so that we had some idea about who to talk to and what we were looking for. The first time using the RFP Navigator was extremely useful in comparing. I really had no idea how this whole thing went through, and that platform really helped. The second time, I can't say it was as helpful for me because we sort of had our criteria set up. I knew what I was looking for, but it still made it much simpler. But having some, the outside guidance, if you don't know anything about the CDMO world and the contracting and the pitfalls and what's this, particularly these change orders and what that's going to involve and why one cheap low price contract may be the most expensive one. That is something you really have to know about, and innocent people like me are not going to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
can I jump in there real fast?
No, Steve. No, I'm sticking with Andy. No, I'm just kidding. See, Steve's, this is where Steve comes in and he says, well, all an emerging biotech exec needs to know is to, skip the RFP Navigator application and come give Abby and I a visit. No,
that would be great. I mean, but there's a couple nuggets in there that Andy really threw out that are like the key to, I don't care what company it is that's looking for a CDMO partner, that you need to be aware of and you should be looking for as a, early on biotech or someone searching for a CDMO partner. The first is the details in the proposal are critical. And, sitting down with Andy, we probably had 5 sit downs together where we talked about what he was looking for, what his program needed, talked directly to his scientists about what the program required. And that really gives us, a special understanding of exactly what they need in their proposal so that we're not looking at, multiple change orders. It's very easy to throw a proposal out there and just basically say, okay, yeah, we're going to do your program for X dollars. Because once Andy signs up, then he's really on the hook and I can change order to the point where I put him out of business, right?
Yeah.
The key is to understand up front. And that is critical that then feeds into the RFP Navigator, right? So I would say that, any small biotech that's looking to do a CDMO partnership, early on work, and the person that's listening to you as a potential business partner is really critical to them as a CDMO relationship with their business. And second point is we're supposed to be a consultant, right? We are not there to dictate to Andy what he should do with his program. We're going to guide him in what's best for his program based on our experience and what we think is going to get his program to the endpoint, which is GMP material. But at the end of the day, he owns the program. His scientists own the program. It's his business. We're there as their manufacturing partner. So we can make recommendations. At the end of the day, it's his decision. Or the decision of the business. And I think those two things are critical so that they can be, as successful as possible when it comes to selecting their CDMO partner and then getting material out for their whatever phase clinical trial that they're doing. So thanks for those nuggets, Andy, because that's the key point.
Well, you did use that word that you're not just a CDMO, you also act as a consultant. And this kind of advice, and it is extremely useful to, people at our stage who really don't have that much of a team. We rely on outside people for this, and feeling like we are a major client, even though we're very small, is important, and feeling like, I can call you up and ask for advice and suggestions, and that it's not just about how you're going to make more money off of us.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
What does the day-to-day or week-to-week sort of cadence of communication, business communication, Andy? I'm not talking about the joke of the day.
I was going to say that's the number one communication.
Beyond the joke of the day, what's the expectation in terms of, Steve, you just mentioned we could change order Fina to death. When situations arise where communication is necessary, what does that look like versus is there a regular cadence of weekly or biweekly or monthly or quarterly meetings where you're just touching base and making sure that everyone's paddling in the same direction? What's that look like?
We have biweekly technical meetings, and I think it's biweekly management meeting. So looking at the overall program, and then in between we have additional questions going back and forth. So we're looking at additional data as it gets generated before the actual meeting, and we get the slides and ahead of the meeting so that we can review and prepare for the questions. Our process is not an academic process that we're tossing over to phase 1 GMP manufacturer, because it's our product has already been made GMP. It's already been in clinical. It's into clinical phase 1 conjugate vaccines. We have a pretty good handle on the product, and it is not like a it's not functional in the sense of an enzyme or an antibody where it has to have, it's a protein. So it's, in that sense, it's simpler than, some other projects. But the protein is also very finicky, and that's the challenge of manufacturing it.
When those challenges arise, what's the protocol for addressing them?
Like telecom, we have the Zoom calls and go through it. Also, can just directly call up through. Generally, we're going to go through their project manager, but speak with the technical person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's also important that there's a primary point of contact, right? And that primary point of contact is their project manager.
Yeah.
Own everything as it relates to the program. Everything gets filtered through them. But Andy has a direct line to me as well. Yeah. So, there's always going to be something in a program that comes up that's unexpected. And Andy has to feel comfortable enough to call me and say, hey, did you hear about this? And how are we handling that?
Yeah.
And we're all, to make sure we're all kind of lockstep in getting his program to the end point. So, yeah, that's, those are all kind of open doors and, clear lines of communication about, what we need to do in order to get his anything moving in the right direction.
I'm going to come back to the marketing budget and the dinners. Getting to know the people is really important. When you're Zoom does help, but really there's nothing like spending hours, at an event, talking to somebody. That really helps. And we're not able to get to Texas now to go visit Scorpius, but that is high on my list of things to do, to meet with the people in person. It's good to know the personalities of the people and their, so the face-to-face meetings are important. That is something that we haven't gotten to, but that does relate to another reason why we picked Scorpius. The other lead contender was Northern European. And it's just, sending things back and forth. The time difference was all going to create issues for us. Very easy for us to ship material back and forth because we're making the material at essentially the same level in our own lab. Just we're doing a 5-liter scale, not the larger, that we're mimicking stuff. So material can go back and forth for us to evaluate and for them to evaluate. So to speed things up, for example, while they were before they got to the fermentation, we sent paste that they could use for downstream processing and to start that in order to speed things up. So things didn't have to be done entirely in a linear fashion. I think that would have been harder to do with a overseas manufacturer.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, I want to get back to something that Andy mentioned when we were talking about sort of the cadence of interaction and communications between the two companies. You mentioned, that there are biweekly technical meetings and biweekly more managerial product level meetings. Is it, full transparency, is it more or less challenging in a relationship with like Fina's, where you're probably having both those conversations with Andy? I get the impression that regardless of what level the conversation is on, like that batch, that product, that long-term strategy, and Andy's probably the center of that conversation.
He wears multiple hats, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of like he's the person that sells you the ticket and gets you on the train at the same time, and then drives the train, right? So yeah, so it's definitely a different level of conversation, right? And I think there is a clear separation. So, Andy does a pretty good job of wearing the hat at the time. And I think he knows that I'm not the scientist on the calls. So he definitely dumbs it down whenever he and I have a discussion. And it's more about, kind of the meat and potatoes of what he's trying to get across. Yeah. He doesn't go on about conjugated vaccines and what I need to do in order to help in that matter. Yeah. I mean, we're more on the business side. I have a technical degree, but by no means am I to the level of the scientists that are at Scorpius. So, so he, I think making sure that we direct the conversation to the right folks. If it starts to get a little bit too technical, then I'll I'll pull on the strings of the people that need to get involved in that. But yeah, I'm there for the business side and support. Never do I want to be the person that is directing or guiding this program. We're going to rely on the experts to do that. And those are the guys and the gals at San Antonio for sure.
On our end, I can't manage this kind of project. We have someone who's really good on details and staying on top of stuff. I'm not much of a detail person, and we have someone who on our end, who's the project manager, keeps track of all of our paperwork, all of the communications. I think that's really important. And then on the technical side, we have Natalia, the scientist who developed the whole process, and she's the one who really supervises the technical stuff. But for example, we're looking at the tech transfer, and we know we're going to make another change in the process. So there's no point in trying to get the tech transfer perfect, knowing that we're going to make changes down the road to something that's going to affect that anyway. So we know the process has been transferred, and now we can. So my decision was, let's not make it perfect at this stage. Let's get to the next phase, and then we can worry about the subsequent part.
Yeah.
So there is the certainly the business part of managing the money workflow, when things are going to happen. So we know when we think we're going to need the material, but we want to make sure that we have the money in place to get there.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. Like when you'll need the material, and then obviously that material is being produced for use in potentially another facility, definitely by another company.
Yeah.
A relationship like this, it strikes me that there are probably multiple opportunities for third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties, right, to have their if not in real time, to have their tentacles sort of intertwined down the road too. So which can be, I mean, from your perspective, Steve, that could be a gold mine down the road, right? Like that could be, at least let's say pragmatically, that it could open up some new opportunities for Scorpius. But in the short term, it can also introduce complications. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, to the degree that you can, talk about like what sort of third party elements are involved, third party and beyond, and how it's managed.
Yeah, there's always third party relationships that are ongoing with programs because, regardless of whether you're considered a one-stop shop CDMO, you're always going to rely on some kind of third-party work, right? Whether it's third-party testing, maybe you don't do drug product filling, maybe you don't do clinical packaging, and in those cases, the best thing again for me is to advise Andy on who he should potentially go with that might be a good fit for his program, right? There's a bunch out there. Again, Andy's going to run into those situations where he doesn't know necessarily who to work with, or maybe he doesn't have experience. But, my ears on the ground as it relates to those relationships and the capabilities of other, I guess what I would call contract manufacturers, but not necessarily on the GMP drug substance side. So I could make those connections for Andy. I can say, hey, Andy, these are the folks you want to talk to. I can certainly do it on their behalf and essentially continue to manage that with our project management. It really depends on how Andy wants that relationship to look. So, we can kind of craft it however Andy wants that to be handled. Sometimes companies don't necessarily want the CDMO to handle clinical packaging and distribution. But if they want us to handle it and they want us to be kind of that conduit between the clinical packaging business, we're happy to do those kind of things. So it's really a la carte. Whatever he wants to do, we'll do it for him.
I would say on the other end, one of as we discussed before, I'm a magician. So part of that, performing is I like to make other people happy, and I like to help other people. And I almost became a technical sales rep, and the idea of going around and helping people with their problems. I like when people come to the lab. I like to have a network of people. And in the same way, and it's why I'm, happy to be on programs like this, I like to work with other people. And what I found is, as I've run my company, try not to be transactional, try to make it relationship based. And so somebody will come around and maybe I don't need their product, but I can refer them somewhere else. I can help them. And now I've made a new friend. And in the same way, Scorpius has really been helping me in reaching out to other people and other companies. And, I'm able to bring in and referrals to Scorpius. And, some of them, they can't do, but it's still bringing in business and helping to get their name out there. So it's really, helping other people is how you help yourself is kind of the philosophy.
Yeah.
And Andy has done that. He has done a really good job of promoting our relationship. And it's definitely, we've definitely seen the benefits from it. So we much appreciate it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're kind of running short here, but I got a few last questions for you. One would be, I could go long. Andy, you were just talking about the relationship and the people, and I appreciate that, man. I love that. Like I love to hear about that. The soft stuff. Yeah. At the same time, I think about experiences that I've had being, in business with family that have gone awry, right? Like things it doesn't always go well. When you care about the person you're doing business with, sometimes those relationships do not juxtapose cleanly. So let's talk about expectations and measurables. Like how do you keep the business part business and sort of chart the measurables and the expectations and work toward them, right?
We have a deliverable product. We need something, we need the GMP material. We're going to end up with a bunch of protein that meets specs in little vials. That's the bottom line. So all the nice stuff and the jokes are just part of getting there. Yeah. But in the end, it's a business, and we need to do this. It's a lot of money, and we need to have a product at the end.
Yeah, and it's early. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
I was going to say, and there's definitely been, scenarios that, Andy and I have a great, personal relationship, but there's also the point where we need to talk business, right? And on both sides. And we've had that, we've had very good discussions. We're going to solve those things. And there's definitely a line between, business and pleasure. Happy to go out and have a drink. We're happy to go out and have dinner, but we got to make sure that we deliver. Andy has expectations from us as well that we need to make sure that he's attending to. So, we've had those good conversations as well. Healthy business relationship.
Yeah. Running a small business, and particularly when there's no investors involved and there's no pot of money anywhere, that cash flow is critical. And so working with Steve on managing that and expectations on both sides, I've made certain promises I'm going to deliver by the end of the year, and it's going to happen.
The way I posed the question I mentioned that I had Jenny Holt on from Ray Therapeutics. She's a chief business officer there. So she's answering to Paul Bresky, the president and CEO of Ray Therapeutics, and a board, right? Like these are things, these are nuances that you don't need to deal with, Andy, because of your position. But correct. The way I posed the question to her was, I said, Jenny, if Paul and the board were to come into your office right now, like as you and I are speaking, and say, like, you need to rationalize in clear terms the money that we're spending on our relationship with Forge Biologics, how would you do it? And she gave me a really good response to that. But you Andy, don't necessarily need to rationalize it to a board or to your boss, but you have to be able to sleep at night and
sleep at night. I think you answered the question. I don't have to rationalize it. I have to rationalize it to myself in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where this is going to come from, because it's definitely, this is a major undertaking for a company that does not have outside funding. But it's moving forward. We have the resources to do this.
He does have to rationalize it to his wife, though.
That too, yes.
That's an omnipresent challenge for all of us married men. I understand that one completely. Right. One of the conversations I frequently have with sponsors about outsourcing relationships is just you were talking about tech transfer a few minutes ago, Andy, and I've frequently heard conversation with biotech execs around just how loath they are to make a change, to go through that process again, which you guys did. And Andy, obviously it was an inflection point for the company. You needed more capacity, so it probably made sense. But I guess the dark side of this question, Andy, would be what would be considered cause for change? What could Scorpius possibly do to screw?
How could they screw up? We're still in the honeymoon phase.
I know.
So we haven't gotten to the assigning of the blame yet.
And I'm coming at you with such a downer of a question.
We're really. I mean, we would. At this point, I really can't think what would change.
How about I can answer that, because if we can't deliver, then Andy needs to find someone who can.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
that is, and that is our expectation, is to deliver the product that we told Andy we would, right? That is what he should expect from us. And if we can't deliver, then he needs to take his program somewhere that somebody can. And that is the expectation of anyone who has a CDMO partner. Yeah. You need to have material when you need it. Yeah. You need to get material when you need it, and the promises need to be kept.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the deliverable. I believe Scorpius can deliver this. I mean, we obviously wouldn't have selected that. You don't get married with the expectation of getting divorced.
Right.
and we're going to do everything that we can to make this work. And I have no reason to believe otherwise based on anything that I've seen or any of our interactions. I've been really happy with the meetings and how things are going with it with Scorpius.
Yeah, I would say that you should never settle, right? You should have high expectations, and those expectations should be met from your partnership.
Yeah.
I will say I've been involved in several tech transfers now, for both as part of Fina Bio, because we transfer conjugation processes to GMP facilities. Mm-hmm. There is always, you spent years working on this process, and then to essentially throw it over a bunch of paper over the fence and expect that it's going to be duplicated exactly is unrealistic. So you really need to be working with the CDMO, depending on the level. Here we've got batch records, GMP batch records to transfer. We know the process works. So it's a little bit different than an academic who's, yes, it worked in the lab and now just make it bigger. That never works.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is the classic mistake academics, will do. And I sort of learned that the hard way as projects come into us.
Yeah.
So really it's understanding that it's not going to go perfect. I mean, humans make mistakes. It's how you address those mistakes. That's key. And I see Scorpius, being willing to do this. One of the CDMOs I worked in the distant past, this is the way we do things, so when you give them the process to improve it, they know what they've done, and they won't recognize there's a reason you ended up with this, with this step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned recognizing mistakes, and it's just solid advice. It's not the mistakes you make, but how you deal with them. And I know, again, it's early in the relationship, but at this stage in the relationship, looking back on the contracting process, the MSAs, the expectations that have been forged, what would you either of you do differently if you had a redo? Has there been a step in the process so far you're like, we probably could have handled that a little bit better?
I'd probably ask for less daily jokes from Andy, but that's
really
no,
all right. You're off the list.
I was actually going to ask.
Sometimes I get more than one daily joke, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's a daily joke. It's a second daily joke.
Yeah. Sometimes Matt, I miss the meetings because I have to go to my Kleptomaniacs Anonymous meetings, and I take something away from every session.
I got that's very good. Is that exemplary of the day? I was going to actually ask where I could subscribe to Andy Lee's daily.
No, it's
daily
just really a private list.
That's probably a good thing, because if that joke you just made is exemplary,
that's the better one.
Yeah, I'm out.
Some of them are a little better than others.
Yeah. We go with volume, not quality. That's
right.
I love it.
No, if I had to change anything, I think that I would have loved to get to Andy earlier, because the sooner you can get to someone, it helps them create their program and get it on a better pathway faster. Like I said, I had been doing this for a while and had come from large CDMO, and I think that consultative opportunity for me to kind of give Andy guidance on what I would do if I were in his shoes, I personally like to do those kind of things. So especially for someone like Andy. So, unfortunately, I can't turn back the clock. So
we really started this project pretty much with Scorpius really starting up. And so, it's about as early on as we could have gotten.
Yeah.
There are not that many companies doing this kind of thing that are still, solely owned by one person. Mm-hmm. And this is not the only, we also are starting a company around our E. coli strain that can make all kinds of other interesting proteins. Mm-hmm. And so that's the challenge. We still we have our conjugation services business. And then early on, recognizing all this stuff takes time to make money, we also sell polymer-based diagnostic reagents, so based on conjugation. So we supply modified dextran polymers for research and for commercial products. And so we take our expertise in that. So all these to make what we think are the best products in this. So we really have 4 business areas. The carrier proteins for conjugate vaccines is just one of them. And so keeping all these things in the air as one person running 4 businesses essentially is a challenge. And so having, really reliable outside help is key to making all this work. And I'd say the employees at Fina Bio are what really make it run, and the outside consultants that help are the other key. And again, helping other people, I've found, and having this, we'll call it do-gooder approach to business, means that people come in and want to, are willing to help us, and we get a lot of help for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can certainly appreciate that about you, Andrew, after spending the last hour with you. And I hope it's not the last hour that we spend together. I'd love to have you guys back on probably down the road. You know what I mean? As you get closer to achieving some of those output goals that you're looking at, we'd love to revisit the relationship.
Sure.
Steve, it's been a pleasure to meet you as well. I will let bygones be bygones. Let the water under the bridge. Abby's probably going to be mad that I even brought her up on this podcast, but we'll let that go. In fact, Steve, I'll be you're down in the Pittsburgh area, right?
I am. Yep.
All right. Well, if you happen to be in Market Square area at the People's Gas, what's it called? The People's Gas. People's Gas Market.
Yep. Yep.
Is it good? Because my wife has informed me.
When are you going there?
So my wife, she wants to go have dinner on the Strip Saturday night and then do the People's Gas thing with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law. So we're thinking about doing that Saturday night. Is it good?
I mean, I love the Strip district. No, I mean, I love the Strip district. I'm not crazy about Market Square, but I love the Strip district. So, I mean, I think if you're going to have dinner in the Strip,
that'll be the highlight.
Good places down there. Yeah, it's going to be a good time for you. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be cold.
Oh yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time down there. Like we like Luke Woolies and I'm sure
now,
we'll hit
is it light up night? Is that why you're going down there?
Listen, I have instructions, where I need to be, when I need to be, and what I'm driving. That's what I know. But I was just going to say, if you happen to find yourself downtown Saturday night, I'll keep an eye out for you and buy you a beer for spending the last hour with me.
And I'm going to say, welcome. We're located in Rockville, Maryland, where Fina Bio has been. I've been in that area now, getting on 30 years. I've been within about a mile of the same location. It's a great area. It's just packed with biotech companies, and it's a great area to be doing business in the biotech field.
I noticed that live on air, you actually enunciated Maryland. Is the way that you were saying it earlier before we started recording sort of an insider's thing?
Yeah, it's Maryland. I'm from Boston originally, and we do pronounce words strangely, but we can say Maryland.
All right. Well, Andy, Steve, thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, we'll do it again down the road. I appreciate it. But in the meantime, I'll let you get on with your day. Andrew's got 3 other companies to run today, so we'll let you.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Yep, much appreciated. All right. Thanks.
So that was Fina Biosolutions Dr. Andy Lees and Scorpius BioManufacturing VP of Biz Dev and Client Partnership, Steve Lavezoli. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online. If you like listening in on conversations with biopharma, medicine, and deal makers like Andy and Steve, subscribe to the Business of Biotech podcast. Sign up for our newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. And be sure to leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. And as always, thanks for listening.